Should have minimized. I'm Marshall Shannon with Ministry Design Training, and today we have as our special guest Alan Wilds, who is a generosity coach and capital stewardship consultant with Generis. Alan's been working with churches for over 12 years, and today he is going to bring to us Step 3, the third part of a 4-part series on generosity game plan. So, Alan, we're so glad to have you with us today. You take it away and teach, and we'll listen.
Thanks, Marshall. I appreciate it as always. Just to jump right in, this is Step 3 of 5 steps in a generosity game plan that we've been talking about. We've talked about 2 others today, and I'll get into those earlier than today, and I'll get into those in just a minute. But this is just some learnings that I have had over the last several years, and in working with churches primarily for a number of years in the capital campaign side of things. We learned a lot in talking with churches just on a regular basis and talking to business administrators and executive pastors. And so we have transitioned not away from capital campaigns by any means, but into the everyday generosity consulting and coaching world as well. And so these are some of the learnings that I have found over the last several years. And so I'll just dive right in. What I found is that we need a game plan. I'm a former high school and college baseball coach, and I talk in terms of sports and game plans and strategies and teamwork and those kinds of things. And so I just feel like we need a game plan. We need a generosity plan for our church. We have plans for almost every other ministry, major ministry in our church, but for some reason we don't have a written down strategic plan of how to accelerate generosity in our churches. So this is just a beginning and the big steps we think that every church should have. And as I said, we've just found that most churches do not have an intentional strategy. What we do know is that people do not have a giving problem. They have a giving to your church problem. 2008 certainly changed the world. It changed things here in America and around the world. It certainly changed things in the church world as well, and it definitely affected giving. There's no doubt about it. But what we found is that the dollars are still there for people to give, but what the major difference is that people are being much more shrewd as it pertains to their investments in nonprofits. And a lot of times church leaders, we don't like to think of ourselves as our church as being a nonprofit, but to many people, churches are in a long list of nonprofits or parachurch organizations that are doing really good work and making a kingdom impact. And a lot of times I think church leaders think that churches are the only place that are making a kingdom impact, and that's not good thinking. And so we have to be a little more shrewd as well, and how we show our people in our churches that investing their dollars in the local church is a very, very wise investment. So we need a plan. So there's 5 focal points of a generosity game plan, and the first 2 we've already spoken about. We've talked about vision and we talked about communication, and we did a podcast on both of those, and you can find those on the website as well. And so today we're talking about financials, and this is always a fun topic to talk to people in person, because now we're starting to get a little, Marshall, as they say, you done gone to meddling at this point. So we're getting ready to meddle a little bit, and let's see what we can come up with. So let's talk about the financials. I've found that there's 2 types of people as it pertains to numbers. There's very simple. There's people who like numbers and people who don't. I tend to kind of fall more towards the side of the people who don't. They don't come intuitively to me, instinctively. I've learned to deal with them because of my line of work. I mean, I coached a sport that's probably the most numbers-oriented sport of all, and that's being baseball. But Marshall, I was using a computer software back in 1994 to help me compute earned run averages and batting averages. I still don't know to this day that I can compute an earned run average on my own.
Wow.
But thank God for technology. But numbers can confuse. They can be confusing to people, especially to people like myself where they don't come instinctively and intuitively. And so we don't want numbers to confuse. Obviously, we want them to do quite the opposite. A lot of times churches talk in percentages and numbers, and as do businesses. We talk in percentages and numbers, and sometimes, oftentimes that can be confusing. But one thing that I have noticed is that smaller churches like to talk in percentages, and larger churches like to talk in terms of numbers. And always find that very interesting, that we can make numbers, people where numbers come instinctively and intuitively to them, they can make numbers do and say just about anything that they want them to do and say. And obviously we don't ever want to be manipulating numbers, but we do want to use the numbers to help tell the story. Numbers can clarify. They don't lie. If your church takes attendance, there they are. There's the people. And giving numbers don't lie as well. So let's talk about those two things. Let's talk about attendance. Does your church take attendance in some shape, form, or fashion? Whether it's with pew pads, or registration pads that go down the rows, or whatever. Do you ask your people to sign? Do you do connection cards where you're asking people to basically just sign in or check in with us? I know of even churches that have kind of a kiosk out front where people are asked to just sign in before they go into worship, and it registers in their database of the amount of people that showed up. Now, obviously, no system is going to be perfect because you're relying on the people to give you the information that they attended. And then there's the old-fashioned way of just somebody standing in the back about halfway through the service and doing a head count. The problem with that is you have numbers, but you don't know the people. But I would rather have the numbers than nothing. So attendance is a big deal. A lot of churches put a lot of emphasis on it. I personally feel like it is important. I don't know that it's the end-all, be-all, but it is important. So the question is, do you track it? Do you have separate communication strategies for the faithful, the followers, and the fair weather? You have people, if you have 52 Sundays a year, you have the faithful, they're there 45 to 52 Sundays a year, and you have the followers who come maybe 3 times a year, and then you have your fair weather people who come Christmas, Easter, and maybe when their children are singing or something along those lines, they might show up and be in worship. We need all of them. We love all of them. They all help us be the body of Christ. But my question is, do you have separate communication strategies for each of those groups? Now, obviously, if you're not tracking names in attendance, that's going to be very challenging for you to do. But I would just encourage you to think that through. I would obviously encourage you to have separate communication strategies for those 3 groups. I mean, we can just talk to them differently. You're probably not going to invite the fair weather to and expect them to attend a called church conference, but you would expect them to possibly come to a big open house or a picnic or something along those lines. So there's just various ways of communicating. It does get a little complicated. It forces you to have different lists, distribution lists, mailing lists, email lists in your database. But if we're going to be very shrewd in how we communicate our vision with our people, then it's worth the effort to try to create those lists and to track these numbers. Another stat that I always like to see is, how long does it take for a first-time visitor to become a regular giver in your church? Attendance is directly tied to giving, and we have found that it takes if it's a first-time visitor who is an unchurched person, it takes approximately 3 years for them to become a regular giver after they attend for the first time. And that is a long time. That is a long sales cycle, as they say in the business world. Obviously, we are not just trying to assimilate people, first-time visitors, into our church just so they can become givers. I mean, I do talk about money all the time, and I talk about churches and how to be more, for their people to be more generous. But I want what's best for each individual's heart, and what is best for their heart is for them to come and to be a part of the church family and to listen and to hear the gospel preached and to study and become active in their prayer life. And then ultimately that will lead to them making a financial investment in the church to God through that local church, and then their heart will be completely connected with God. So a lot of times that giving is the final frontier or the final hurdle for people to get over to truly become in communion and connected with God. And so are you tracking that? Do you know how long it takes for a first-time visitor to become a regular giver at your church? Do you know the difference in giving levels of your people based on how often they attend? I think you won't find many surprises if you do know that. You'll find that people who attend more give more. People who attend less obviously give less. But it's information that you probably want to know. What is that gap? What are those numbers telling you? They're telling a story, and what are they telling you? So are you tracking that? Do you know the breakdown of the 4 generations in your church as it pertains to attendance and giving? Marshall, I've worked with a church here in the last few weeks. This is the fall or December now of 2012, and I just finished working with a church in a generosity audit. And one of the things that I asked for in that, as I was analyzing, was just a breakdown of numbers. And this business administrator of the church, he gave me this amazing spreadsheet, and it has all 4 generations broken down. It has the matures, it has the boomers, the Gen Xers, and the millennials. And they have an amazing amount of data on these people, giving, attendance. I mean, it's crazy. And I looked at it, and I told him, I said, man, this is awesome. I said, where did you come up with this idea? I said, this is just great. He says, I got the idea from you. And I'm like, you got the idea from me? And he says, yeah. He says, you remember that seminar that I attended with me and the pastor and a couple other people who came, and we sat down and you talked to us? You're the one who told us that we should be tracking attendance and giving based on generations. And I'm like, well, man, I'm not used to people actually listening to me. So so it was extremely cool, and man, did it tell the story. It really told the story about attendance and giving, and how the church is connecting with each one of those generations, and really clarifies things for them as they move forward in their communication strategies and in their outreach and discipleship strategies. The pastor also mentioned to me, you may have heard of this, called the death tsunami. And I thought, man, that sounds awfully morbid and kind of scary. And he was talking about one of his peers had done a presentation, I think it may have been the guy's doctoral dissertation, on what is going to be happening, especially in mainline traditional churches. This death tsunami is getting ready to hit, where the people of these churches that have been upholding the church with their giving and their service are aging, and when they leave, when they leave this earth, it's going to leave the church and the local churches in a pretty big mess as it comes to finances. And they had some pretty sobering statistics in that study, and just how quickly it's going to happen over the next 15 years. And so if we're not addressing the younger generations and how to engage them, and if our demographics are showing that our millennials and Gen Xers are a pretty small percentage of our people, then a lot of these churches are going to be in a mess financially in 10 to 15 years without a strategy. It's a very interesting study. It's called the Death Tsunami. You can Google it and it'll show up. It's very interesting study. Are you spending too much time communicating with one generation when you should be focused more on another? And that kind of goes hand in hand with what I was just talking about. Knowing the numbers, it helps you clarify things and helps you see, wow, we thought we had about 30% of our families were 40 and under, but in fact, we have 47% of our families are 40 and under, and we haven't been spending enough time talking with them, or whatever the situation might be. But just knowing the numbers can help you clarify things. Let's talk about giving. What type of analysis do you do with the giving numbers? When I'm sitting around the table talking to the financial team or committee of a church, and I start getting into analysis, I get a little scared because I don't necessarily know what I'm talking about completely, because analysis of numbers comes a little challenging for me. But when I start getting them excited about, or start talking about analysis, man, they start foaming at the mouth a little bit, because they love the idea of being able to analyze numbers. But when I start talking about analyzing giving numbers, slow down now. Slow down. We can't know about what everybody gives now. We got to slow down. So this is at the beginning. I started talking about meddling. I'm getting ready to start meddling. Do you notice trends in giving? Are there trends? There absolutely are. Are there spikes in giving, up or down, especially as it pertains to individuals? Are individuals, does a certain family have a spike in giving, up or down? And that there's a story behind that if there is a spike up or down. I'm going to come back to that in just a minute. But numbers can help you tell the story of the church. They truly can, and we want to tell stories. If you remember our communications, we were talking about telling stories. Here we go. Here's the meddling. Does the senior pastor in your church know what the staff gives? Marshall, you were a pastor. Did you know what your staff gave?
No, I did not.
Do you think you should have?
Yes, I do.
You want me to move on, or you want to tell them what I'm getting ready to say? Because you and I have not rehearsed this, so I'll let you off the hook.
Thank you.
Assumption. All people. Here's an assumption, and I think everybody that's listening to this has probably at some point in time had the word assume broken down for them. And if you have never had that word broken down for you, shoot me an email, alan@generis.com, and I'll break it down for you. But there's an assumption that all people on the church staff give and give generously. And we all, and Marshall, we know what they say about assumptions, right?
Yes.
If you are a pastor and you are listening to this and you are assuming that your staff gives and you are assuming that they give generously, that's probably not a good idea. And if you don't know what your staff gives and are to be able to determine are they giving generously, I don't want to say shame on you, but you should know. You should know. The pastor must know what the staff gives to ensure that he or she's having the proper conversations with the staff. You know, we also assume that our staff are perfectly mature disciples, and that is just such a bad assumption. The pastor must disciple the staff before the staff can disciple others. It's just leadership 101. But I think a lot of times we as senior pastors and leaders in the church, staff leaders, we take a staff member through a hiring process and an interview process, and they impress us. If they didn't impress us, we wouldn't have hired them. So they impress us, and we just assume from that interview that based on what they've told us, we draw assumptions and conclusions that they are mature disciples. And at that particular time in their lives, they might have been a mature disciple, but we're all human, and we all fail, and we all fall, and we all sin, and we all backslide, if you will, and we all need to be pastored. And some of the loneliest people on the planet are pastors and staffs of church. They are some of the most unpastored and discipled people on the planet. How in the world can an engine perform at its highest capacity if it doesn't have quality fuel? And pastors, you need to give your staff the fuel they need in order to be able to operate efficiently. Does the senior pastor in your church know what leaders give? Just in the same vein of what we were just talking about. Here's another assumption. All church leaders give and give generously. That is probably not a good idea to make that assumption. Knowing what people give allows the senior pastor to ensure that the leaders are bought into the vision of the church. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. If you don't, if you have someone that you are considering to be in a leadership position, and in the last 12 months they have given $500 to the church, I would venture to say that they are not giving generously. Now I know I'm casting a pretty big net here, and yes, I will allocate that there are people at all different giving levels in our churches. I totally understand that. There are people who are unemployed. There are people who, but let's just take $500. I mean, 10%, that means that your annual income is $5,000. Most people in most churches have an annual income of more than $5,000. I'm not big on the 10% thing, and there's really no way for a pastor to know is someone tithing. They're going to have to show you their W-2s to know whether or not they're tithing or not. But that's between them and God. But I think we have a pretty good idea of whether someone is truly invested, sacrificially invested in the ministry and the mission of our church. There's no right or wrong number. There's no threshold. There's no floor. There's no ceiling. But I think by having a candid, open conversation with the person in your church who monitors giving, between the two of you, you can determine and discern whether or not this particular candidate to be in leadership is giving and giving generously. This gets a little touchy, but I'll be candid with you. If I was a senior pastor, which I am not, but if I were a senior pastor and I'm sitting in a bunker or in a foxhole and I'm getting ready to go out into war, and I'm getting ready to jump into the middle of the battle, when I get out of that foxhole, I don't want to have to look over my shoulder. I want to know that I want to feel the breath of my leaders on my neck. And the best way to determine whether or not leaders are passionate and are bought into the vision is where are they investing their dollars. So that's pretty straight talk, but it is what it is. The pastor must disciple the leaders before the leaders can disciple others. Once again, we assume because someone has been nominated or we've talked to them about being a leader that they are mature disciples. The divorce rate is over 50% now. I would venture to, I'm not going to sit here and throw stones at people, but over 50% of the people who are being divorced are not non-Christians. There are a lot of Christians who get divorces, and I'm just using that as one example that our people are not spiritually mature. They're just not. And we need to be discipling them. We cannot just completely focus on the lost and the unchurched and the de-churched at the sacrifice of discipling our leaders. Pastors, you're much more effective if you can disciple 12 to 15 to 50 leaders and let them go out and to get the lost than you are trying to fly solo, trying to get all the lost by yourself. You need to disciple your staff. You need to disciple your leaders. Be their pastor and let them go out and do it. I mean, we have a pretty good model for that in Jesus with the disciples. I mean, he was a pretty smart dude. If the church is to be a generous church, it must have generous leaders. It's just, again, leadership 101. The senior pastor and staff must be generous, followed by generous leaders. I mean, again, I can't say it enough. Does the senior pastor in your church know what the rest of the people give? Giving patterns tell a lot about people's lives. I mentioned this earlier, and I said I was going to circle back around to it. If there's a spike in someone's giving, or up or down, it can help the pastor be a better pastor. Let's take it for instance, Marshall. When you were pastoring, you probably had plenty of those people that were in that faithful category that I was talking about earlier. You had plenty of people in the followers category, and you had plenty of people in the fair weather category. But you knew you're faithful, and you probably had people that had been at that church way before you got there, and probably are still there now, and they probably give. And most people give in the same pattern over the course of their lives. They either give biweekly, weekly, biweekly, or monthly, and it almost never changes. You do have a few that give it all at the end of the year, but their giving patterns almost never change. Once they begin giving, they almost never change. That's one of the things that we have found out. And so if I'm the person who is tallying, recording the giving on a Monday morning or a Tuesday morning, and I know that Jim and Nancy give monthly, and they've been giving $1,500 a month or $500 a month, whatever the amount is. But they've been giving the same amount of money every month on the first Sunday of every month for the last 5 years. And record keepers, treasurers, bookkeepers, whatever, the people who data entry, they can tell you that they don't know what people give, but they know. They know who the faithful are, and they know who the followers are, and they know who the fair weather are. And if Jim and Nancy, 1 month goes by that they don't give, it probably may not even alert them at that point, but it may probably triggers a little bit of a question mark. And then the second week goes by, and the third week goes by, and now they realize they weren't on vacation. They have been at church, and wonder what's up. So then the next month comes and goes. The first Sunday of the next month comes and goes, and there's two first Sundays in a row that Jim and Nancy haven't given, and that's the first 2 Sundays they haven't given in 5 years. Marshall, as a pastor, do you think something's going on in their lives?
Yes, you do. And
I mean,
yes.
And the only way for you to know is?
It is to know what they're giving. And for
Yeah,
years, guys taught that a pastor should know what individuals are doing, but you're missing such a huge gap. There's a huge gap in there in discipling them if you aren't privy to their giving patterns so you can take care of them.
Yeah, and notice I didn't say right there that the bookkeeper or the treasurer or whoever it is, the financial person, I didn't say that they have to call the senior pastor and say, hey, Jim and Nancy have missed their $1,000 payment or their $1,000 check two first Sundays in a row. The amount of money at that point is irrelevant. It's the fact that, and you don't even have to know how much they give at that point. That's not the point. The point is that something's going on in their lives, and you need to be their pastor. And most people, if something bad financially happens in their lives, most people, for whatever reason, are ashamed of that. And they are embarrassed by that. And when we are ashamed or embarrassed by something, we do not go around blabbing about that and talking to people about that, especially our pastor, because we want to keep up the front that nothing's wrong in our lives. And that's human nature. So they're not going to come and knock on the pastor's door and say, hey, pastor, we've missed giving the past 2 months because, I got reduced in hours, or I lost my job, or my son had to go into drug rehab and it's drained every bit of resources that we have, and we just can't give right now. They're not going to do that. They're just not going to do that. But if your business administrator or your treasurer or whoever it is can flag that and say, hey, pastor, Jim and Nancy have missed 2 months in a row. They haven't missed 1 month of giving in 5 years since they started going to church here. Now they have missed 2 Sundays in a row, 2 first Sundays in a row. I thought you might want to know that. Thank you very, very much. Now the pastor can log a phone call to Jim and Nancy and say, hey, Jim and Nancy, y'all been on my heart. I'd love to connect and see what's going on in your lives. Can we connect for a cup of coffee or something? And boom, you set up a cup. Oh, pastor, gosh, there's so much going on. Yes, absolutely. Can we just come to your office or whatever? We need to talk. And then you begin to have the conversation, and you just say, Jim and Nancy, what is going on? I heard desperation in your voice. I heard upset. You're upset about something. What is happening in your life? And lo and behold, you figure out now why they have not given, and it has absolutely nothing to do with the church, but it has to do with what's going on in their lives. Pastors are called to be shepherds, and giving is for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And we just can't forget that. It's a huge, huge opportunity for pastors to shepherd their people. Knowing people's giving patterns can help the pastor be a better pastor. Numbers matter, but they only matter if you use them and you use them for good. I encourage you today, schedule the appointment with your financial administrator, or your business manager, or your business administrator, your executive pastor, whatever the title is of the person who handles all of the numbers in your church as it pertains to attendance and giving, and begin to work out a plan and a strategy with them, something that you're going to be comfortable with, something that's not going to violate your promises to your people, but something that you feel comfortable, that's going to allow you to know the information and receive the information when you need it in order to be able to shepherd your people in a better way as it pertains to their giving. Remember, please remember, people do not have a giving problem. They have a giving to your church problem. I am convinced that the dollars are there. When you see the levels of giving to nonprofit organizations in 2011 and almost now at the end of 2012 compared to 2007, they are not that far off. They are lower. Yes, they are, but they are not that far off. The money is there, but people are being much more shrewd in how they are investing the dollars. We must help our people believe there is no better place for them to invest their dollars than in their local church. That is our job. And people who are listening, if you don't think you have to compete for the dollars, the charitable dollars that your people have to give, then you are making a huge tactical error. The days of people giving to the local church just because are over. they are over. And as the matures go on to meet our Heavenly Father, and the boomers become the older generation, and the Gen Xers and so forth, as we move on, that giving just because goes away very, very rapidly. We must compete, and we must help our people believe there's no better place for them to invest their dollars. Marshall, I appreciate it as always. Anybody who's listening, you can see my information on the screen there. If you want to reach out to me and engage, I'd love to engage in a conversation about anything that I've said in this time or other on communication or vision. I'd love to chat. Thanks, Marshall.
Oh, Alan, thank you so much. I wish I had had access to you when I was a senior pastor for those 18 years. Thank you so much. We look forward to parts 4 and 5. And let me encourage you, as a subscriber, that if you have questions at the bottom of the video screen, as you scroll down, you'll see a question area where you can email or write it in, and we'll get the question to Alan. He'll help us answer those things. Thank you much. Till next time, this is Marshall Shannon with Ministry Design Training.